Welcome, everyone, to the Fantasy Phoenix podcast, here to give you tips for NBL SuperCoach. Let's start off by reviewing round 5. It was a pretty solid week for us with 423, which brings us back into the top 200. As a side note, we're also thrilled to announce that we're part of the Podmasters Cup for the inaugural NBL SuperCoach season. Shout out to Kane for putting all that together. Speaking of, he was the only coach in the Cup to score higher than us this week with a juicy 444. Check out our Twitter profile, or X profile, to keep track of the Podmasters Cup, and make sure you're following Kane, the Podmasters Cup, as well as all the other legends that are part of it. Hopefully, will lead to some really, really good banter and fun, and if we're lucky, winning the Cup as well. This was the big week we spoke of last week. We loaded up on the Cairns boys, boosting for Clintman, Miller, and Wardenberg. I was tossing up between the Berger and Cheatham, and we got a little bit lucky with our choice there. Miller was on for a season-high score before missing the second half of Game 2 with that awkward landing and the injury that followed. As of recording, all we know is that he's neither confirmed in or out for the round, but from all reports, there's no head or concussion issues. It's only that sort of pain / soreness in the back. Both TJ McCall and Armstrong are expected to suit up though, so it will be a big watch on him. After seeing how JLA was playing and increasing his minutes since his return, I made the right call to bench Huckporty for Wardenberg, which was also key in us choosing Wardenberg over Cheatham with the DPP flexibility. To be honest, if Cheatham was forward centre, I would have brought him in, and I'm now very fortunate that he wasn't. Bobby Clintman also let us down slightly in that first game, and even in the second game. The second game really showed his skill set. In the game 1 against Illawarra, Ford had him on the bench for a bit, and I think that was when they were going through different lineups, and perhaps there was something that Bobby wasn't doing that he wasn't a fan of, because he had a big stretch on the bench. But he was there to close out the game, basically. So Ford likes him. Hopefully he can keep performing. But he really, really, really needs to take better control of the ball. Both games turnover affected. Could have been a really, really solid round. But hopefully he'll get there. There are 6 teams on the double this week. And every team on the single next week. Making it a little bit easier to make some decisions for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So let's have a look at some players to potentially trade in or out in our buy, sell, keep, and avoid. Buy are players that I think are good options to trade in if you don't already have them. Sell are players that I think are options to trade out if you do own them. Keep are players that are being traded out, but I think you should consider keeping. And avoid are players that are being traded in, but I think you should consider avoiding. Our buy for the week, Alan Williams. Big Sauce has been cooking since his return from injury, averaging a double-double. He's also chipping in a few assists a game as well. He may be pricey, but with a matchup he has said he wants to be up for against Big Baines and the Taipans with somewhat undersized bigs this round, I think Williams goes quite well. Every team having the single next week means you don't have to trade him straight back out again, so that definitely helps in the decision. Sell Ariel Huckporty. His output has steadily been dropping since JLA's return, and I can't see him getting back to near his early season form. Melbourne also have 5 singles in a row now, so scheduling doesn't support his case. There's a few good cheap options and a couple of top-end guys in that position that you can easily replace him with. When I say easily, maybe not the top-end guys, but there's options there, and I think that it's time to say goodbye to Huckporty. Keep Alex Sarr. Of all the top players being traded out, I think this is the one that has the most reasoning to potentially keep. He does have a high break-even compared to his recent output, but the Wildcats have the equal best schedule over the next 3 weeks along with Cairns and New Zealand. Perth need to get cracking very quickly. They've got coaches under pressure, ownerships having to make statements, imports that are being told to be released, all this stuff. But one guy that should be played more is Alex Sarr. If you have luxury trades and you're moving him up to a starter like a Finn Delaney or even doing some DPP action and he's away that you're bringing in like a Sauce Williams or someone else, I don't think that's a bad option. If you're moving him down to someone like Bannon, that's also a very, very good option too. Otherwise, I think he can be held for a little bit longer, even with his potential cash drop. He's got the double this week, the single next week along with everyone else, and the double the week after. Hopefully he can pick back up to where he was and give us some nice points. Now this one is mainly as a precaution here with that injury cloud. But as I mentioned earlier, it looks like both Armstrong and McCall are going to be back this round. So even if he is fully fit, his output may be decreasing. If he is going to be right to go for both games, then I can't see any issue trading him in if you're going to keep him for the long term. You need to keep a really close eye out on this one and hopefully make the best decision when it's time to make the move. Let's take a look at our top 3 captain options for round 6. At number 3, Jalen Adams. He's been quietly going about his business and is the number 3 averaging SuperCoach player in the comp. Has that juicy Hawks matchup as part of his double this week, and if you've held him in your squad, he's ready to repay the faith. Number 2, Parker Jackson Cartwright. Had a quiet first game last week by his lofty standards, but showed us all again what he is capable of in Game 2 with a massive 51 SuperCoach points. With Cheatham out, PJC is the main man in New Zealand, if he wasn't already, and will have to shoulder a heavy load to try and help his team get back on track. And at number 1, none other than Alan Williams. It's time to get saucy. The man is on a mission, and along with what I mentioned earlier in the bias section, he's averaging 40 SuperCoach points a game, less than a point behind PJC, the leader. He's also been vocal on Overtime saying he wants to come out and be the MVP of the league and try and be in that serious form. And add to that, the discussion with Tommy Greer on his podcast about how the team's going to be taken to Vegas if they win the championship, which Source will need to ball out to make happen. I think he's going to want to play well. In all seriousness, though, he's having a great start to his year, and with his higher scoring and assist output than last year, he is a great captain option, and he's going to be where my C will be placed this week. Which leads us into our trade plans. After a successful boost last week, we're back to the 2 standard trades this week. I set up the trades for points, cash gen, and also a bit of a war chest to make our first move this week, which is Huck Porty to Big Sauce. My second trade was going to be Ben Ayre to either Armstrong or Bannon via some DPP, but if Miller isn't confirmed to play both games before the lockout, I'll have just enough cash to move J-Rob to Nathan Sobey as cover for Miller. I'll have a bit of a play around with the trades towards the deadline, but I'll post the team on X once the moves are locked in. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening or watching, depending on where you tuned in. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, obviously very much helps us and we appreciate the support. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Spotify as well if you're listening in on Spotify. If anyone has any questions or feedback, you can drop them in the comments below or hit us up on Twitter or X at fantasyphoenix_. And we're happy to answer anything. If you've got questions or things like that, we'll can answer on Twitter/X, but also shout you out on the pod as well. All of the support is very much appreciated. And as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, make sure to check out the Podmasters Cup so you can keep track of our progress. Can we keep climbing the ranks? I think we're about 4th or 5th overall in total points. There's a couple of guys around that top 100 mark ahead of us. So we're not too far off the pace. Hopefully we can keep pushing and get right up there towards the cup. Good luck everyone for round 6, and we'll see you in the next episode.